Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Shemariah Blum-Evitz, and with Land for Good, I'm a program director. I'm talking to you today from Deerfield, Massachusetts, and our central office is in New Hampshire. And we work across New England, and we're so glad to have people filing in today. I'm going to invite you to put in the chat box your name and where you're calling from. And if you'd like, you could acknowledge the native lands on which you reside. I'll do an example there. Oh, I think I sent it to the wrong place here. Try that again. Okay, thanks, Susan, for chiming in. And Meg, why don't we go ahead? We'll talk a little bit about Zoom. We are using a Zoom webinar today. And this means that you're going to be able to see our panelists for the whole time, but all of the participants you won't be able to see. You can send messages via this chat box that we're using now, and you can choose to send that just to the panel or to everybody in attendance. And you can also notice at the bottom, we have a Q&A feature. So that's a question and answer at the bottom of your screen. And at any time, we're really looking to get answer the questions from the audience today. So please feel free to use that question and answer to put in questions that you want the panel to see. And we will try to answer them as best we can. Great, and we're getting people from all over the US. This is pretty exciting, everybody. Thanks for joining. Okay, I also want to point out that you can't see her, but Meg Quinn from Maine Farmland Trust is our tech support today. And you'll find her in the list of panelists, I believe, in the chat box. And you can send her a message if you're having any tech issues that are coming up for you. And she can help out. Help out. Thanks, Meg. Thanks, Meg. Oh, I'm suddenly getting go. The panelists, maybe to mute yourself for now. That helps. We want to recognize the generous conference sponsors, all of these wonderful folks that help make this conference possible. And also the USDA's Beginning Farmer and Rancher Development Program that awarded a grant to Land for Good for our phase 3 of our land access project, which is also contributing to the funding of today's event. And we'll move ahead, Meg. Just to clarify where you are at the Farm Transfer Stories and Lessons session. So hopefully this is where you wanted to be. Thanks for joining us for the conference. And I want to go ahead and introduce our panel. So here with me today is Cynthia Fair. She's the owner of Darthea Farm in Goldsboro, Maine. Cynthia and her husband, Bill, started Darthea Farm in 1976. And as they aged, they realized that in order to keep the farm viable, they needed partners. So they tapped into Maine Farmland Trust, created an LLC, and brought on young farming partners. Last year, when Bill died, these partners, Shepsy Eaton and Liz Morin, started taking over farm operations. Next, I'm going to introduce Janet Woodward and James Wheeler. And they're a mother-son duo of Indian Head Farm in Berlin, Massachusetts. Thanks for joining us. The farm has been handed down in the Hastings Wheeler family for 7 generations. And they find themselves on the cusp of a new generation as James and his brother have chosen to stay on the farm. The family's been working with Land for Good, first by participating in the Farm Succession School, and now by working with recommended resource partners to get financial and legal advice, interpersonal mentoring, and agricultural assistance to move the succession forward. William Nunnally of Nunnally Family Enterprises is here as well. Thanks, Will. He's a master carpenter, career commercial superintendent, and a single father of 4 children, all under 10 years old. I think we might get to hear some of them in the background today. He's an agricultural specialist who's working hard to improve the quality of farming and farmers in Maine. As such, he's championing social issues as well as economic empowerment through agriculture. He's also affiliated with the Marginalized Agriculture of New England Society. And last but not least, Catherine Roof. She's currently senior advisor at Land for Good, where she served as director from 2004 to 2015. And she's written, consulted, taught, and led projects about farm access, tenure, and succession for over 30 years. And Kathy did a wonderful job of recording. I hope many people got a chance to see it. And if you haven't seen it yet after this session, it's on the conference website, Farm Succession Planning Basics. And it's about a 45-minute presentation about some of the basic information to think about when you're starting this process. And there's also a list of resources on the website. And invite you all to check those out if you haven't found them yet. Kathy, did you have something you wanted to add? No? Okay, great. Okay, moving on. Oh, I also wanted to mention while I'm talking about the website that we have a new glossary on the website for the conference. And this goes over some farmland access as well as transfer terms that might be helpful, basic information, as well as some racial justice and equity terms that might be good foundation if you'd like to understand more of the language that you're hearing throughout the conference. And now we're gonna throw up a poll that everybody who's attending can answer that will tell us a little about you who are joining us in the room. Which of these best describes you and which of these describes why you're joining today? So you can, the second question, you can check all that apply. Okay, we've still got a couple of people that look like they're trying to answer, so, but this is great. We have about half of us are service providers assisting farmers with farm succession. And we have a number of next or junior generation farmers interested in farm succession opportunities. We have 4 farmers that are either with an identified successor or looking for a successor. And a lot of people, the great majority of people want to learn the process of succession planning and want to hear about different models of structuring. So that's great, definitely in the right place. And for more on the process of succession planning, also recommend watching the webinar that was pre-recorded that goes with this session that's on the conference website. Okay. Thank you all for being with us. I I just want to point out a couple of things, and then I'm going to let the panel take it away. Just that there's no singular way to do succession, and a succession plan will depend on the particular retirement goals and the needs and visions of other farm and family stakeholders. Farmers and landowners have a variety of visions and goals, and thus can really shape a plan. We are seeing folks come forward with goals of considering reparations in their succession plan, wanting to implement a conservation easement or restriction for development. Folks, as much mentioned already, researching tools to pass down to a family, and also to find an unrelated successor. We'll hear about different approaches today, and one thing I think you'll take away, I hope, is that it's going to take time to do a succession plan, both in planning it and also when it comes time to implement and complete a transfer. So I mentioned language a little bit already, and I just want to clarify the terms succession and transfer. Those at Land for Good and elsewhere are often used interchangeably, so not to be even more confusing, but they refer to passing from one generation to the next, and that can be within a family or not. Transfer is used more often for when it's passing within the family, but it's not always the case. And the successor is usually a term we use when we're talking about a new person or persons who are taking on the farm business, and sometimes referred to the junior generation or the next generation. And also to clarify, there are many parts to potentially transfer in a farm business. And these can happen at once or in different pieces and stages, and even to different people. So we talk about it in one group as the management or the leadership of the farm, another, the assets, which could be equipment, cows, infrastructure, and another group would be the real estate, the land and the buildings. And so with all of that background, we're gonna give each panelist is gonna give an introduction, overview of their farm and where they are in their succession planning process and what they see as the next steps that might happen. And then we will, I have some follow-up questions and we'd be happy to entertain questions from the audience. So I am going to pass it first to Cynthia. And thanks so much, Cynthia. Take it away.
Hey, thank you very much. The picture, the slide that you see are our new farmers who are succeeding me. That's Liz and Shepsy and their two children, Cedar and Harbor, and me under our farm sign. And the farm is going to go to them, and I will try to walk you through what it was like when we first moved and what we had done with it and how it's being passed along to Liz and Shepsy and their family. Bill and I were both teachers in Massachusetts, and we came to Maine in 1976 to a derelict farm that was falling down. And it hadn't been farmed since the 40s. It was built in about 1850. And we had 33 acres of land. We couldn't afford to buy the whole parcel at that time. And we found a lot of oxen shoes. So we presumed that the farm was worked with oxen, probably a lot of hauling of rum from the shoreline up to resell. The house was a wreck, plaster falling down, no insulation, no storm windows, no heating system. And the barn was very full of bat guano. And there was no cleared land except for a very, very small piece to the left of the barn. But we arrived with 2 horses, a few sheep and goats, chickens. And so we had to do something. So we immediately started putting up fencing some to fence the animals out of areas and some to fence them in. And that first spring, we plowed a small piece of land that we had cleared with a 400-pound pony. That's all we had to do the work. We joined MOFGA that first year, and we bought a whole lot of how-to books. And many of them were worthless. Some of them were very good, but we read all of them. And we cleared land, we dug fence holes for fence posts, we fixed the house, we shoveled out the guano, we built sheds, a workshop, farm store, shipping room. And today it's a very different looking farm. We have 255 acres of woodland, pasture, hayland, and cropland. We also built a commercial kitchen, a couple of apprentice houses, a workshop, a B&B right in the middle that kind of keeps us going, and our partner's house, mostly built by ourselves with wood milled here on the property. And we sell organic veggies, fruits, chickens, sheep. We grow flax, which is really fun because I'm a spinner and I spin it into linen thread. Processed foods. We have a farm store, which we didn't open this year because of the COVID, but we hope it'll be open come May of next year. A farmer's market, a CSA, and we do most of the work with our team of Haflinger horses. Now, the second thing people wanted to know was my position on the farm, which has changed quite a bit. When Bill and I first came, we worked together all day, doing all the sloppy work of putting a farm back in operation. I'm a writer and a teacher and a fiber artist, and Bill cut pulpwood and saw logs to make money to plow back into rebuilding this farm. You don't just go to a farm and start farming, especially this one. And we've had over 300 apprentices and woofers, along with several gardens managers. And a year and a half ago, after we had our successors in place, thank goodness, Bill was 82 and had an accident in the woods hauling wood with the team. We don't really know what happened. He was in the ICU for 2.5 weeks, and we brought him home from the hospital to die here and buried him on our farm cemetery. But fortunately, Shepsy and Liz were ready to step in at that time, which was a godsend. So here I am alone in the 10-room farmhouse. I entered semi-retirement, or tried to. Our partners are taking over running things. And I, at almost 77, serve as a sort of a consultant. I still spin and dye wool from our flock of sheep. I write, I volunteer, I work with our local theater, and I serve on a lot of boards. So that's my position on the farm. And the last question that they wanted me to discuss was an overview of succession and transfer of Dorothea Farm. It really takes place over several years, quite a few years, and is always ongoing. About 15 years ago, we started thinking about who was going to take over the farm. And our kids were not interested. They all were in a city and doing different things. My son was a fisherman, and nobody was interested in farming. It's much too hard work, and there's very little money in it. So that kind of struck out. So we hired a few managers over the years to help out, but none wanted to commit long term. And then we kind of had a turning point. 8 years ago, our barn burned down. The one you see in the photo is not the one that was there when we first moved, although they're very similar. Our horses, sheep, calves, birds, equipment, everything went in the fire. And it was a real turning point. We thought about giving up, and we stayed up all night with, the firemen were there, and it was a terrible mess. Only one animal survived, and that was a little chick, and we named him Lucky, and he just died last year. He was quite a little rooster. Anyway, we were up all night and thought, well, there's no way we can continue. We didn't have enough insurance on the barn to rebuild anything like that. And there was a knock at the door, and a woman came in who was a customer. I didn't know her very well, and she was crying, and she had an envelope in her hand, and she gave it to me. And I couldn't say anything. I didn't know what to say, and nobody said anything. There were 4 or 5 of us sitting around, Bill and me and our apprentices, our farm manager. And she left, and I opened the envelope, and there were 50 $100 bills in the envelope. That's $5,000 for those of you who have trouble with math. So we realized, how could we give up if somebody we hardly know thinks that's important enough to give that much money? So the community got together and rebuilt the barn. They sent money, they came with their saws, they brought food, and the sign behind the photo is Dorothea Farm rebuilt by human kindness, and that's exactly what happened. We needed to see the farm continue, especially Bill, and years ago we had donated our development rights to the Frenchman's Bay Conservancy, so the farm could never be broken up, but it could still be sold for a vacation home, and we didn't want that. And our wonderful gardens manager, who we hoped would stay, had to go back to Puerto Rico because her father was quite ill. So we filled in an application to FarmLink, a program of Maine Farmland Trust. We had a number of responses, and we were contacted by a couple from the Midwest, and we did a lot of Skype calls. They had a daughter who was 8, and we decided that this could be a good match. And they sold their house. They sold all their possessions except what they brought here. They got a trailer and lugged everything out here to the farm. And the first couple of days we thought, oh, this is just great. You know, these people are going to take over and it's wonderful. But the third night, the woman passed out and threw up all over the place, having a little party with the apprentices. And we realized that she had a severe alcohol problem. They ignored their child, who spent almost all the time with us, which was okay, but it was their child. And the man had horrendous anger issues, which we slowly found out. One day, the apprentices came to us crying, both the male and the female, in fear of this man. And Bill called a meeting and said, you're out of here tomorrow. And we got up the next morning and they were gone. So that wasn't a good thing. The apprentices stepped up, but they had planned to leave to go back to their family in Reno. And it seemed we had failed. We had failed to find somebody, and it was really getting to be too late. The next day, it was in the fall of 2015, Shepsy Eaton and Liz Moran contacted us. They visited a few times. They moved here in the spring of 2016. And in 2017, we worked with our lawyer, after failing with several other lawyers, to create an LLC, a limited liability corporation. And the children all agreed it was important to keep the farm going. And I'll try to explain this to you. Bill and I were 100% owners at the beginning. And each year, Shepsy and Liz would receive 2.5% each per year of the LLC. And the LLC includes all buildings, equipment, land, animals, and they would keep receiving that 2.5% each per year until they owned 50%. And they would gradually take over farm operations. We could live our lives here on the farm and retain our 50%. And after Bill and I were both dead, they would have the farm. I now own 85% and Shepsy and Liz own 15%. And when I die, they will have the farm. There's no money that's being exchanged because young farmers aren't rich. They don't have a lot of money. We trust that they will continue farming, and I can see the love that they have of farming, and I feel that they will. But we didn't have anything that said they have to farm for 50 years. They've made a lot of changes, which has been hard for me at times because I'm a control freak. But it needs to happen. And after all, when we came here, we decided what we wanted to do. So it's only fair to Shepsy and Liz for them to make decisions about what they want to do. Liz has created an amazing sourdough bread business. Shepsy's taken over Bill's beloved horses in a way that would make Bill happy. When Shepsy drove the wagon to take Bill to our little cemetery, it was the first time he had driven the team with the wagon. Now he's an expert horseman. So I look forward to seeing the direction they'll take in the future. And that's, you could show the rest of the slides if you'd like. There's our new barn, brand new, and fields in the back. That's the manure spreader that we saved. This is Bill Hayne next door with a team. And we no longer have access to that. There we are pressing cider, all of us together. And it was pretty good cider, if I remember correctly. So I think that's all of them.
Thanks so much, Cynthia.
You're welcome. I hope that was helpful. I do have this limited liability here. If anybody wants any specifics from it, I can read them to you.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Well, a reminder, if people have questions, you can add them to the Q&A function and we'll get to them in a little bit. I'm going to move on to Janet. Janet, you want to unmute and join us?
Forgot about the mute.
There you go. You got it.
What I said was, Cynthia, you're a very hard act to follow. You're a good storyteller. But I will try. We're at Indian Head Farm in Berlin, Massachusetts, which is a small town at the crossroads of two major highways, which doesn't hurt business for most people in that area. The family farm, family has been farming here for 7 generations, and that's since 1833. The farm is 180 acres, but mostly woodlot, with about 35 acres under cultivation. And you can see from this photo that I chose what the farm looks like, although we don't own all those houses. Those are our neighbors, as you probably figured out. We raise small fruits, strawberries, blueberries, and raspberries, doing pick your own, which is very popular here in Massachusetts, and a variety of vegetables. Our sales are through direct marketing in our farm stand, and we do a little bit of wholesale as well. And my responsibilities include managing our licensed kitchen, where we mostly make jam and muffins. We'd like to expand that eventually. And value-added products, I am responsible for keeping the shelves in the farm stand full with products from other farms. History plays it's kind of a defining characteristic of our farm. People are interested in it and they ask us about it a lot. I'm going to have you switch to the next slide. There we go. This is the farmhouse, and this is where we live now, minus the porch that came off in the 38 hurricane. And standing beside, leaning on the porch post, standing beside it is James's, who you'll meet in a few minutes, his great-great-great-grandmother, Cordelia. And you can actually even see 2 oxen in the shadows there, the early tractors. And Cordelia, around the time of this photo, the management of the farm transferred to Cordelia from her husband because he died in the Civil War. We have her diaries, which is such a rich resource, and she talks a lot about what they were all doing and how they managed without him. The next slide will show, the next slide is a picture of the older gentleman is Cordelia's son. And his name is Arthur, and he's holding his grandson, Willard. Around the, excuse me a minute here, I've got my notes on these photos. Oh yeah, Arthur loved farming. He was a dyed-in-the-wool farmer. He was an experimental farmer, and he had such passion for farm that he passed along. He transferred his passion, I do believe, as well as the farm, to Willard's mother, and then eventually to Willard. And the man in the blue shirt in the inset photo is Willard in his late 80s with his grandson, Nate, who is James's brother and my son. And we can go to the next photo. And this is a more current photo. This is modern times, of course. There are 2 missing family members that are in this picture that have passed away since this picture was taken. First of all, I'll tell you who these people are. On the left is my husband, Timothy, who's done a lot of the management of the farm over the past few decades, with the help of his father and his brother, who is on the opposite end behind me, Richard, who has passed away very recently. In front of the tractor is Nate, who is the son you saw in the hayfield, and then James, who you're going to meet shortly, is standing in the doorway. Tim's father, my father-in-law Willard, is sitting in the chair, and Willard was the baby that you saw. So continuity, history, as you can see, is a big part of our identity. And you may, oh no, let's stay on that. Let's stay on that slide. We'll just stay on that slide for the next few. Thank you. This has been a time of change for us, and a very natural time to be thinking a lot about succession. As you have just heard, we've lost family members. We lost my mother-in-law not too long before my father-in-law. And so the transfer, both in terms of management and ownership, has been forefront in our minds. About 30 years ago, Tim and his father, Willard, set up an S corp. What appealed to them about that back then, and that was LLCs weren't too prevalent then, so they didn't even consider them at that time. But the S corp allowed for shares that could be transferred in the same way that Cynthia described. You could pick how many shares you wanted to pass off over time and gradually transfer the farm. And this would be just the business part of the farm, all the buildings and so forth. The property was not included in that. So what we're experiencing right now, I kind of like to call a convergence of transitions, because it was only recently that my husband actually inherited the farm with me from his father. And that we're talking about still settling that estate. So this has been very recent. So at the same time, we are very committed right now to beginning the process of transferring over property to our sons. And so not property in terms of land, but property in terms of shares in the S corp. And so this is a time, as I say, of a lot of change for us. But we're also having to make some big decisions. And the first really big decision that we've made since the loss of Grampy was choosing a new name for the farm. For generations, it's been known as Indian Head Farm. And people who've had farms for a long time will understand why this is a really big deal. But it was very important to us. In fact, I understand that this topic came up in one of yesterday's sessions. So I imagine this news is going to be welcome that we're planning to change the name. We all strongly support this change and are beginning to home in on a couple of possibilities after much discussion, and I will say debate. While we've all been in strong agreement and frankly are feeling a lot of relief that we will be able to change the name. We've spent considerable time pondering and debating what the new name will be. And in the true spirit of succession, I'm happy to say that we will likely defer to the younger generation in making the final decision. We close for the winter. And so over this winter, we'll be working on the many, many tasks involved in a name change, as you can imagine. Over the generations, we have acquired a lot of moving parts and thus have turned, thankfully, to Land for Good to help us through this. Beginning with us attending the Land for Good Succession School, which we learned so much from and were very impressed with. And it opened doors to partners that they work with who could help us who are professionals who could help us with the decision-making that we had to do. Right now, we're in the process of meeting with a consultant that works with Land for Good to learn actually mostly about internal management of the farm and also financial management. We feel we get quite a bit of help from our lawyers, and they're working with us right now on the name change. And we get quite a bit of help from our financial advisors. But working with someone who is very familiar with farmland and with transfer issues beyond just the finances is where Land for Good has been helpful to us. I think that's the information I wanted to get out. So I'm going to have you switch now to the last 3 slides. These are just sort of examples or we captured 3 different moments. The first one was sitting around the kitchen table. I think we were ordering seeds, and that certainly is a very evident transfer from one year to the next. Tractors for 3 different generations here. They each had to have their own tractor. There's James in the background, Tim on the left, and Bill Willard, my father-in-law. And what they're doing there is spreading mulch. We only have 1 cow, so we don't need a big spreader for manure. And always we try to take time to communicate. And here's my mother-in-law and me. A lot of what we decided and a lot of what she taught me happened in moments like this. And there's James and Tim having a very casual moment, having a chat about whatever it is that they needed to talk about at that time. Communication is key, and it's something that we do expect to get some help on from Land for Good, because it's hard to shift your communication from being family members to being business partners. And that's something that they've been helpful with. And at this point, I'd like to pass it on to James. Where are you, James? There he is. And he'll take it from here.
Hi, my name is James Wheeler. I'm one of the family members here at the farm. My role is probably a bit vague, just because small farm. One of the things that we haven't really done a whole lot of historically is just defining formal job descriptions and stuff like that, just because there hasn't really been a need to. But I started when I was young, just doing some field work, and over the years I've picked up responsibilities here and there. But for the last 10 years, I've also been working off the farm a bit as well. I'm the assistant town clerk in Berlin, and I've done some web development for a IT company in next town over. So my focus has been a bit divided. COVID kind of brought me back to the farm full time. And so there were a lot of things that we discovered we needed to do a little differently this year. I think we're all kind of in that boat. But so setting up an online store for curbside pickup, setting up reservations for the pick your own operations so that we could manage how many people were in the field at any point in time, stuff like that. And then also just managing the pick your own operation a little bit more directly. We hire a lot of high school and college kids, and to some extent, some of the issues that they're going to be dealing with day to day were a little bit beyond what made sense handing over to them. So it we were a little bit more involved this year than we might normally be. But but in a typical year, in general, between my brother and I, who are starting to step into more managerial role, I tend to focus a little bit more on the ag side of things, and he tends to focus a little more on the business side of things. And so that's worked out well for us so far. But I think my mother kind of covered a lot of the succession oriented topics, but in general, it's just kind of a long story here at the farm. We've been here for almost 200 years as a family, so it's something that it can't really say that you're practiced at it, but it's come up before. So we have some models to base what we're doing now on, I suppose. But recently, yeah, there's been some changes at the farm that's kind of accelerated that whole process of succession. And so my grandfather passing away, my uncle passing away this year. And then COVID has just kind of forced a bit of a transfer of managerial responsibilities, certainly, in the last, 8 months, probably. Really. And so a lot of the day-to-day operation is now something that my brother and I take care of for the most part. My parents are always stepping in here and there, and my father is happy to kind of say he's retired and hang out on the tractors more and more. But and so, but with this year kind of wrapping up, this has been the first time. This, just preparing for this conference, really has kind of given me an opportunity to think about some of the challenges that we might face in relation to succession, and just the topic in general, because I've been a bit distracted this year. The thing that's advantageous overall, all the family members, I think, are pretty much on the same page in terms of vision for the farm. So that's helped us a lot. We want to keep the farm as a working farm. And so we're all kind of operating within that constraint, and no one's really moving in a completely different direction. So it really, what it's come down to is a lot of sort of more just standard business challenges, things of we're growing as an organization. There's year to year, we're doing more sales than the previous year. So it's just the business is growing, and as a result, formalizing decision-making processes, communication, job descriptions, stuff like that, which end up tying into conversations around succession, are really where most of our focus has been. And that's where working with folks at Land for Good has been advantageous, because they have specialists who can advise us on those topics, which might otherwise be a bit over our head. So, but I think that's pretty much it.
Thanks, James. And also Janet. Yes, great to hear. I know it sounds like Janet has been enjoying starting to think about retirement and getting to flowers that haven't been gotten to in a long time.
And Tim painted the house
And painted the house.
while the guys were working.
Nice. So we're going to turn now to William. Would you like to give us a history of your farm and where you are and your thoughts about succession?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Will Nunley. I apologize for the background noise, but as was stated earlier, I'm a single parent of 4 kids, 3 of them my own, 1 my nephew, 3, 5, 7, and 9. They are a handful often. I just bribed them. That's the reason why they're being good right now, because I just bribed them. So we came to Maine in 2015. primarily because I was raised in Texas. I was sick of 100 and whatever degree day weathers. The one thing I knew that I did not want was to be hot all summer long, right? So I went as far north as I could. Ended up in Maine. I bought a patch of forest, 45 acres to begin with. We now have about 65 acres. Had a sawmill, a chainsaw. I kind of done it pioneer style because that's what was economically feasible. You know what I mean? You can get a whole lot done with a sawmill, especially if you buy a bunch of trees. You know, and you got a little bit of skill to go along with it. And so I had skill, I had some tools, I could afford some trees. So that's kind of how our farm came along. I bought 45 acres in LaGrange. It's about 28 miles northwest of Bangor, sits just west of Howland, just south of Milo. It was a quiet town. All it had was a general store and a post office and a fire department, which I felt like covered all the bases, you know. Plus, it's only 30 minutes from Bangor, so I can get to Bangor if I need to do any big supply runs. But at any rate, I built my house, and in 2017, I got hurt in a tractor accident. Had a tractor climb on me. It broke my shin bone and my thigh bone, so my tibia and my femur. And I've been recovering ever since, right? But so to get to the point, so after I hurt myself, I had to rely on the generosity of others. That being said, I built a tiny house on the back of my property. I have a couple cabins back there, and I have some at one time employees, now good friends that help me operate my farm. I raise beef. As a matter of fact, I just brought a shipment down here to Turner. I raise beef to champion a lot of issues. We don't have that much time, but I raise beef to get something done, right? So at any rate, for me, what happened is that a paycheck wasn't enough for these guys, you know, us family, guys, girls. It just wasn't enough, you know, that I didn't feel like I could pay them enough monetarily to express what it has meant to me for them to be by my side and still willing to help me attain my goals and my dreams, especially when I was wheelchair bound, when I was walker bound, you know, when I was stuck on a cane for a while, you know. And so I reached out to CDI, and I was speaking with a gentleman who's no longer with CDI, but I was speaking with him, and he really started me down the path of how I wanted to transfer my property. And what I wanted to do was give it to the workers. So we started having good in-depth conversations about what succession looked like and how we would go about, and we're still in that process. Yeah, I'm sorry. CDI is the Cooperative Development Institute. I didn't quote them because I don't know where they're located out of, so I couldn't, you know. But anyways, it's the Cooperative Development Institute, and I was working with a wonderful gentleman named Jonah Ferdigbird. And now I'm working with another gentleman, Mr. Arthur Sabati, and I hope I'm pronouncing that properly. And so we're setting up the organizational structure because I'm trying to champion a lot of things with this land. I commend the rest of the panelists because they too are championing community-based hurdles through their agricultural efforts. And that's something that we as a society has drifted entirely too far away from, right? So what I'm trying to do is I kind of want to do a hybrid of a worker owned and cooperative housing model transfer for my farm and the farm workers on there through a collaboration with land in common. See, I want to protect the land. I don't just want it to be, you know, at some point I leave and then a cooperative has the ability to change through its participants and then vote to do something different with the property as it changes hands later on. And what I wanted to do was make sure that it stayed a viable farming enterprise that supported itself so that its members were not only involved in agriculture, but they were also economic stabilization. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell, you know. However, I'm a whole lot better at answering questions, so I'm willing to answer any questions any of you guys might want to have.
That was a great overview. Thanks, Will. And certainly send us your questions. Kathy, I wanted to give you a moment. Do you want to say any comments from your own experience as an advisor or reflections on what people have shared on the panel so far?
That could be a big answer or a little answer. What I'm struck with is how these are really classic examples of different succession scenarios. For Cynthia, you found unrelated successors. Janet and James, you're doing a pretty classic intra-family succession. And Will, you're looking at some sort of non-traditional structures. And at the same time, what you have in common is you all started with or made sure that you got clear on what you wanted and what your vision was for the future of the farm. And there are far too many farm families that get all scrambled up even at that point. And we always talk about how those are some of the hardest parts, is to figure out what you want to do. So I don't have anything else really to say at this point. As all our panelists know, that the devil is in a lot of the details. Cynthia, for sure, to understand more about how you decided the transfer of shares and also how you made a decision about your non-farming children is of interest. And Janet and James, I heard you talk quite a bit about sort of the soft issues around the management transfer, decision-making, organizational development, human resource management kinds of things. And Will, I heard you passionately committed to looking at sort of more innovative or less traditional ways to make sure your farm stays in farming. So those were sort of unique themes that I picked up, and I'll stop there.
Great, thanks, Kathy. And if anyone in our audience has questions that are geared to Kathy, if you watch the recording, we can also try to address those now. We've had a few questions come in. So first, I'm going to go back to Cynthia. And the question was, would you mind sharing again what your family's main reason was for creating the LLC? Why you chose the LLC, if you could say more about that. And also, this kind of relates, a second question. It sounds like you hadn't taken on the LLC when the first couple that was a disaster came on board. And So wondering, was there a trial period for them or with Liz and Shepsy later on before you implemented the LLC? Did you do something like that, have a trial?
We wanted to set up something that could be gradual. It wouldn't be just, here's a farm, goodbye. Because that wouldn't work, and that's not what we wanted. We wanted to ease the whole thing slowly. And our lawyer talked to us about an LLC, and we thought that that sounded like a great idea, and it could be fairly simple. Our kids, none of them was interested, and we weren't about to leave the house to kids who would just sell it and squabble over it. So if they weren't interested, there was no point. We didn't feel like we owed them the inheritance of this farm. And so we didn't leave it to them. The question about the awful couple, we had not decided how we were going to do this at that time. And we talked to them and we said, yeah, we'd like to transfer. We'd like to have someone take this at our deaths and run with it. But we hadn't figured out how we were going to do that. We said, let's talk about it. Let's see how we get along. And then there was another question about what happens when you get somebody that you don't like. So let me just read you quickly this item in our LLC and our agreement with Shepsy and Liz. The LLC interest transferred by Thayer to Eaton Moran should include forfeiture restrictions, providing that if either Eaton or Moran left and were no longer involved in the operation of LLC to the Thayer's satisfaction, any interest in the LLC which had been issued to either Eaton or Moran would revert to the LLC with no further consideration paid to Eaton or Moran. So they would have to prove themselves, or else we would make the whole thing null and void. And after, I think, 5 years, there's no nulling and voiding. So they would have
Can
to.
I follow up on something? You said that there was no, if I understood you correctly, the shares that are being transferred to them are through their sweat equity, or are they paying you?
They are not paying us at all.
Yeah, that's what I thought I heard. So how do they earn that 2.5%?
They earn it by working.
Okay.
And Shepsy does get a very small salary from the LLC. It's not a whole lot of money, but it's something. So he does get something for that. But no, they didn't pay us anything. And, you know, these young farmers, they don't have a lot of money to be paying. You know, our farm is worth $1 million. It's on the water. It's got, you know, a lot of buildings, a lot of housing, a lot of open field. And, you know, we poured everything we had into this place. And so it's really pristine condition. It's got everything needed. But if it were to be sold, no young farmer is going to say, oh, here's $1 million. I'd love to buy that farm for $1 million. That's not going to happen. And what would happen would be somebody very wealthy would buy it for a summer property for all their family. And we didn't want that. So I hope that answers the question.
And your operating agreement specifies how that labor is calculated?
No, it does not. It presumes that they will take over the farm in a good manner, and that's what has been happening.
Okay, thank you.
Bill and I discussed a lot of different things. Should we, you know, leave any money attached to the LLC? Should we make it so that it has to be farmed, you know, for so many years, or if it's ever sold within 10 years, then the money would go to our kids. And then we decided, what are we doing? We're trying to manipulate from the grave, and that is baloney. So we decided not to do that.
Thanks so much, Cynthia, for that honest frankness and sharing.
I'm sort of known for that. Good or bad.
Thanks. I'm going to turn to Janet and James because there was a couple of questions that have come up about the land and whether the land is being transferred with the shares, or how, if the S Corp doesn't own the land, what's the situation with the land transfer? And what property, whether it be buildings or any of the property that is in the S Corp? People are curious. Janet, we can't hear you.
Thank you. I need a secretary. No, I don't know a lot of the ins and outs of an S Corp, but one thing I do know is that there was an intention to keep the land separate. There's something about the feeling of our land for us, the feeling we have for the land is different from the feeling we have for the tractors and the building. Our buildings are included in the S Corp. The tractors, the building, the, inventory, and that's all very important to us, but the land holds a very special importance. And I think that the intention was to keep that back from being part of the S Corp. But whether other people who wanted to put I think there was a question that came up, could we have put the land in it? And that's the thing, I'm not sure. I think the S Corp probably also deals with land, but does anybody on the panel have that answer that I don't have? Okay, so I think that's going to have to be for further research or talking to a lawyer or someone like that. And what
Could
was,
theoretically put the land, and an attorney can obviously correct me, you could put what you want into that S Corp. Most advisors that we've worked with encourage farm families to separate the business from the real estate for various reasons. So your real estate might be held in a different entity, or is it held by you and Tim personally?
no, well, the part of the real estate, the buildings, for example, which is often kept with the land and real estate, are in the S Corp.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I'm reasonably certain of that. And if I'm wrong, I apologize. But and the question that you asked was?
I didn't ask a question. I was just commenting on the how the corporation structure works. And so James and his brother will get the business transferred through the shifting of shares, but the real estate will pass in your estate?
Probably in our, in our estate. I'm not sure. We may set up something else for the land as well, but as of now, we have not.
It
Yeah.
could be a trust or some other kind of instrument.
Yes,
The
yes.
land. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Janet.
I knew someone was going to ask the questions I didn't know. James, can you add to that?
The only piece that might be interesting to add is the general idea, I think, behind the current structure was that if Nate or I didn't want to farm, then this puts us in a situation where the family can retain ownership of the land, and it's very easy to let somebody else, some third party, run the actual farm. And so it added a layer of flexibility there. So the farm as a business entity can kind of be transferred around separate from the property itself.
James, my sense too is that the houses probably are not in the S Corp. I think it's more just the outbuildings and when I said buildings. In other words, I think they're trying to protect and keep separate the things that are of greatest, probably more emotional value to the family.
Well, and there's other parcels that are owned by there's a couple of LLCs that there's a tractor dealership that's associated with that, and some other things. So different pieces are handled in slightly different ways.
The local post office, for example, we rent out, and that is an LLC and a solar array and a gravel pit. So there are other entities as well.
Thanks.
The land management itself becomes a bit convoluted, but
Yeah, a lot of moving pieces.
A lot of moving pieces.
I'm going to move back to Will. We have a question, Will, about curious to hear more about when you started the conversations with the people that have been working on the farm about their involvement in actually owning or being part of a cooperative, when you started those conversations and how that communication is going or arrangement is working out.
Well, it just kind of, we were working and I said, hey, look, what do you guys think about me working something out so y'all can stay here as long as you want, regardless of what I choose to do? And they liked it, they wanted to know more. So they came over to the house. Actually, they were working. I had there was another couple there, and me and that couple, we met and we had an initial talk with Jonah. And then later that evening, I caught up with the other couple, and we sat down and talked pretty much about what Jonah had talked to us about, all together, the five of us. And while the first couple didn't really want to be tied down, they kind of liked the idea, but they didn't want to feel like they were committed to something, and then they were still trying to really explore who they were. And I can dig it, so no pressure. But the couple that's there now, they were like, yeah, we pretty much have rented apartments for the past 20 years. Our grandkids really don't have a place associated with us per se, so dropping stakes right here is just as good as anywhere. You know and like I said, it really meant a lot to me how they stepped up when I needed them the most. And so when I had my conversation with them, what I explained to them is that I wanted to lock the land into the operation. So every open square foot of my property is being used for something, whether it's edible landscaping, whether it's designated gardening space, whether it's horticulture space, because we've kind of been dabbling with the horticulture industry. It's my whole purpose in my layout is that I wanted every bit of space to be a viable production space, but with an absolute regard to the environment. So I wanted a lot of natural things. I didn't want a ton of buildings, and I do have buildings. I have a 1,800 square foot barn I built from a wheelchair. I needed it to be in compliance with a FSA loan. They gave me an approval in December. In a Maine winter, they says, "Hey, look, we got your money ready, but you need a barn up first." So, and like I said, I just got hurt in May, so here I am building decks so that I can get on my tractor. Because a tractor and an auger will do a whole lot more than 4 men and post hole diggers. You know what I mean? So coming into January, I mean, my bulldozer was pushing 4 feet of snow off the ground, but it acted as an insulator. Thank the heavens. It was only frozen 6 inches on top. So once the auger broke free, we were able to put up a post and beam barn over winter in Maine. It was actually excellent. But they were there through it all, you know. So I had to retrofit my shop. I got a 18 by 60 carpentry fabrication shop. I had to retrofit my shop to have a drawbridge door on one side so that I could load material into the shop from the tractor. I didn't have to physically walk it around. I mean, I only had one good wheel, you know, and my leg was bad. So I had to do a whole lot of things to compensate for my injury in order to be productive. Now, a 2 month barn took me 6 months to build because I was hurt and I had to do a lot of fabricating. But whenever I looked to the right or the left, these were the people who were there handing me a tool, handing me a jack, helping me off the ladder, off the tractor, helping me back, the very tractor that run me over, mind you. You know, these were just the people that were there. And so I started having to talk with them early on because I wanted them to understand my appreciation for what they did for me when I was in a position not to do much for myself, as well as being close to them. I knew that if not for me, they would struggle having somewhere else to go. And back to what Ms. Thayer was saying, money is the obstacle. You have a whole lot of people who are willing to learn. They recognize that they don't know, but they also recognize that they can be taught. But the problem with that is that the way traditional lending systems is set up is that's very hard to access when you're a novice. Banks and traditional lenders, they like to lend to industry experts, not necessarily industry novices. Understandably, because there's a large risk factor right there. No. Let me rephrase that. Understandably, because traditional lenders don't understand the agricultural conversation, they believe there's a large risk factor right there. So part of our work has got to be to develop a language that allows us to translate the conversation between the two, because if lenders understood agriculture in a dollar and cents sort of fashion, everybody eats. I mean, it's a sure bet somebody's gonna eat. You know what I mean? So you almost can't go wrong with food. You know what I mean? So the common sense is there. The problem is that we haven't figured out how to have a conversation at the same table about the same deliverables in a manner that both parties understand what's going on. Farmers talk to each other, right? So what you end up with is you're beginning aspiring agricultural entrepreneurs that are inspiration rich and resource poor. It takes people like myself and Ms. Thayer to say, what? You want to get your hands dirty? Okay. Let's see if you really want to get your hands dirty. And in exchange, I'll show you some respect for your efforts. In the absence of anyone else with, I'll show you that some respect for your efforts. And so where we're at now is every other week I get a email from Mr. Sabati at CEI saying, hey, Will, let's catch up. Every time I finally make it home, Albie and Stacey say, hey, by the way, boss, we still going to talk to those folks about transferring the land and stuff. So I got it coming from both ends. However, COVID was it disrupted a lot of things this year. And so what I am is a solutionist. If there's a problem at hand, I will find the solution, you know. And what we needed to do this year is we needed to get a handle on being able to start entering into the main supply chain matrix a halal product, because they were having problems last year with school systems. The attendance rate had shifted in a manner that it was influencing the diet. Some of the kids were on hunger strike, so forth and so on. So we chose to champion that problem. And I took COVID, when I couldn't do anything else, to come down to Turner and build a halal meat processing facility for one of my clients for another business. But at any rate, they're almost online. They're going to be Maine state inspected. We just got a load of cows in here. I mean, when I say just, I mean just, right? You know, the trailer door is still open. That's how fresh it is. I haven't even made it back outside to close the trailer door yet, right? And so I haven't been home much this summer. To get to the answer, I haven't been home much this summer to have the next heart to heart with Albie and Stacy about how this thing is gonna transfer out, nor have I had the downtime enough to get with Mr. Sabati to really hammer out the details. He has a firm understanding of what my wishes are. I've given him that. I just haven't made myself available to him to understand what the next steps are to continue going forward with the plans. However, I do intend to see him this coming weekend, so I intend to make some time to allow him my audience.
So Will, if I understand correctly, your intention is to establish a cooperative. Is that right? As an organizational structure, and you're getting help from CDI to do that. What is your
Yes, ma'am.
organizational structure right now? Are you sole proprietor, or do you have it? What is your setup for your farm?
The farm is owned. 45 acres of the farm is owned solely by me. Another 20
Land.
acres of the farm, right, the land. Another 20 acres of land that attach in the operation, not necessarily in the deed, is owned by Perseco LLC. That's another company in which I have 3 partners on. And so we're just an LLC, but to the earlier conversation, we ended up with some grant money from Maine Community Foundation to do some due diligence on a business acquisition that we've been working on. And in that was some money to pay for some legal fees. And both of the lawyers that we've been talking to have also recommended S Corp, and for various different reasons, right? So I don't know the science or the understanding behind it, but I think uniformly S Corp just protects your interests when your interests align with business on one hand and land on the other. You know, I don't have the ins and outs, but you know, somebody recommended to Miss Janet, you know what I mean, a legal professional, you know what I mean, a legal professional recommended to us, and you know, and so it's probably the best model or mechanism of the allowable organizational types that better protects you in the event that you want to do some type of succession plan. But we are currently an LLC. Everything is owned, all the businesses are owned under LLC, except for the property. The property is owned under me because I bought the land before I formed the companies. And I have never transferred them to the companies because like for the co-op on the farm, not necessarily the Prosecco operation, but for the co-op on the farm, it's a co-op. So again, like Miss Thayer, I didn't want to be dictating the direction it could take in my absence, right? So as a result, I didn't give I didn't transfer any of the land over to the co-op because I want the land to be protected, and my intention is to get that in a trust with land in common. Sort of like, I won't control the operation, but I can put the land in trust to remain in agricultural uses, thereby tying your hands to what you can and cannot do on the land. You know what I mean? I don't want, commercial enterprises, you know what I mean? Hotels, whatever. I wanted to stay in agricultural production. So it made more sense to me to go the route of transferring it to a trust, into a trust through Land in Common. I got a pretty good connection over there at Land in Common. Mr. Ethan Miller, he's a brilliant man. And when we talk often, well, as often as possible. I love mornings, he hates mornings. So whenever we can catch up, we talk. But I really enjoy Ethan. And so I'm working with them because it's really important, like the other panelists have said, we put our blood, sweat, and tears into this. We don't want it chewed up. You know what I mean? We don't want it mistreated. We don't want it to. So for me, I didn't want it to go to a body that was ever evolving through its membership. I wanted it to stay with someone that was going to maintain its essence and intention.
Thank you. So one thing I'll just mention in passing before, Shema, you take on the next question, is the participants can hear that there are various kinds of business entities and legal structures to accomplish what one wants to accomplish. And once you figure out what you want to do, the technical providers can help you. Will just mentioned the formation of a trust. There's different kinds of trusts, and in certain circumstances, that makes sense. We've got the S Corp, we've got LLCs, we've got cooperative. So just to point out that these instruments each have their pros and cons, and can serve the purposes once the family figures out what it wants to do. So Shema, I'll pass back to you for the next question.
Thanks. I have perhaps a quick question for Cynthia that came up from the audience, and then wanted to give everyone on the panel a chance to kind of give us your parting advice, your cautions or affirmative advice of what you would share with others that are thinking about succession. So first, Cynthia, the question was, how do your family living expenses currently get taken care of? Is there an income share, guaranteed payments, and how did you work that out with Shepsy? And I'm forgetting the other partner's name right now, sorry.
I get Social Security because I'm old. And also Bill and I had some funds that we accumulated over the years. And so I get a monthly check from that. That's what I get. I also get pretty much what I want for food, vegetables, chicken, that kind of thing. I'm not sure if that answers the question. I'm not sure what.
It probably does. You determined in part of your transfer plan that you don't need any income, or you projected that you would not need any income directly from the farm. So you
That's
personally
right.
don't collect rent. You
I do
don't
not.
collect any. You said you were a consultant, but you're not paid for that.
No.
So your finances, when you did your retirement budgeting, you figured out that that's that you could be sustained on those sources of income. Thanks.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I don't get paid anything.
Great. As we're getting close to time, Cynthia, do you want to share any last thoughts, things you would offer as advice?
Well, you never know who the people are really until they're there for a while. You've got to just take a chance and invite people and see how you make out, see how you get along, see how you get together, see how, if your values and your morals and that kind of thing are so important, but what you want to see happen to your land. The other thing maybe looks at that in a little different way is that you can't control from the grave. And so sometimes you just have to let things go. And, you know, Bill and I did a lot of thinking, oh no, you know, what if, you know, somebody comes and turns it into a McDonald's? You can't do that. But also our easement prevents it from being developed and prevents anything that's chemical that applied to the fields, that kind of thing. So that's a little bit of a help thinking of that. But I don't know, you just have to have faith in your human friends and companions and hope that they'll do the right thing, I guess.
Thanks.
Our first couple obviously wasn't doing the right thing. And we found out fairly quickly and gave them a boot.
James, how about you? Any last advice for maybe tailored to a next generation or younger generation thinking about this?
Not particularly. I mean, my experience to a large extent has sort of been that it kind of happens to you, which our situation may be a little bit unique in that we've been here for quite as long as we have. There's certainly a lot of farms that get handed family to family, but there's a certain inevitability that sort of always was there in the background. It's you know, it's been handed down so many times that one way or another you kind of figured that you'd find some way forward. And a lot of the structure, that underlying structure, was already there. So the big thing for us, I think, has mostly just been like, you know, figuring out what it is that we want to do in terms of the big picture, is, you know, which fortunately right now we all agree on. But you know, when you don't, that's when you definitely need to bring in some outside help to mediate. But
yeah, can I tweak the question, and either for you or Janet, is to talk about communication, how that has worked, or any advice on how to have communication between the parties?
Yeah, I mean, we're a small family, and so we're all present most of the time. A lot of the communication just takes place over the dinner table. The thing that's starting to happen now a little bit is we're getting to a size where it has to be run a little bit more like a business. Just in that there's more moving parts. We're starting to get to a point where certain food safety regulations start to apply in different ways and things like that. So just the overhead and the paperwork involved in the day-to-day operation is we're becoming different and more demanding. So there's more staff involved in the decision-making process and things like that, which is a bit new for us. So those are things that we're kind of you know, we're feeling out. But we're lucky right now. A lot of staff that's here as full-time has been here for over 15 years. So they're a bit like family in that regard. So it's the same sort of thing. You know, you have a chance to just chat with them.
Oh, I think Will had to just jump off. Thank you, Will. Sorry we didn't get to hear your last thoughts there. Janet, do you want to share any? You're still on mute. If you want to unmute and share any last thoughts or advice.
I've been really good at muting. I just can't unmute. Well, first of all, I've always said, little secret here, that the Wheelers, James's family, are under communicate, and the Woodwards, my family, over communicate. And so I think that we're going to have to try to wiggle a little more toward the middle, maybe than James does, because he's a wheeler and he loves casual communication. But I think that is one thing we're going to get some help with, is just be formalizing it a little bit more, so that not only do we all know what's going on, but we all feel that we have a voice in the decisions if we're sitting with some kind of a structure to the meeting that we're having. This may be the teacher in me, so take it with a grain of salt, but I would like to see us work on that a little bit more than we've been able to up to now, because it's the center of everything. And we get along well, and so we sort of forget that, oh yeah, nobody else knew that this was going on, you know, because we, and I think the other thing that I admire in James a lot is that he keeps perspective on things. And it's very comforting to the people around him too, because it's very easy to lose perspective and to think that a disagreement about something is really vital and I'm going to go away and lick my wounds. And then when you really put it in perspective of the whole operation, you might be more inclined to just go away and say, oh, let them decide. You know, I think perspective is a very important thing, and to know what are the important issues and what are the minor details. Kathy, yes.
Oh, I just want to, I'm not interrupting you. I wanted to make a parting comment.
Oh, all right. My other parting comment is to share something that doesn't come up when we talk about Indian Head Farm, and that is that we also have, my family has Meadowbrook Farm, which is in northeastern Connecticut, and is very much of an old style farm. My kids are 6th generation there. They're more interested in wildlife management, but that doesn't have, depending on where, how many ways James and Nate can split themselves. As he said, we have a small family. That may not have a successor to live there and run in the farm after my generation. So all of these things that I'm hearing from people, Cynthia, yours fit right in with this issue, I'm listening. I'm listening very carefully, and I'm just my parting shot is I'm ever so grateful for people like you folks, and to be able to have comrades and guides that help us through this, because I think I'm going to be knocking on the door again. So thank you all to all.
Thanks, Janet. Kathy, and thanks everybody who, if you need to chime off, go ahead. We have, I got so wrapped up in hearing from everybody, I forgot we have a couple closing slides, but it will be quick. Kathy, last thought.
Mine's one sentence, which is what Janet just said, is that each of these examples relied on service providers, advisors who formed part of a team, large or small, obviously legal advice, financial advice, and then there's a whole set of other providers that can play in significantly. So very few farm families can do this complicated succession planning, both the hard issues, the legal stuff, and the soft issues, decision-making, communications on their own. So kudos to those of you who have reached out to advisors, and message to the service providers on this in this workshop that you are desperately needed out there.
Thanks. And I will echo a thank you to all of you for joining us today, our panelists, and also the attendees. And I hope this was valuable. Don't forget there's more on the website in terms of the other recording and a list of resources that can help you find those professionals, and other guidebooks that could help you get started on this process. There is also an evaluation form that we'll be putting in the chat, and you can find on the website. We'd really like to hear your feedback. We will send it to you in an email also. It would be great to get your feedback of the conference overall. And this slide shows some of the presenters that are presenting at the conference. We're trying to raise up some of the Black, Indigenous, persons of color organizations that are doing work in our region. There are many others out there. These are folks that are presenting this week, and encourage you to check them out and to consider donating if you have means to do so, or networking with them and getting to know them. Lastly, tomorrow the conference continues. 1 o'clock is communication between farmland seekers and landowners. And at 3:30, we're talking about different models of affording farmland and getting onto farmland. And I think the last slide is a plug for a couple of trainings that we have coming up at Land for Good. We intend to launch registration for both of these programs soon, later this month or early December at the latest. So our Farm Succession School will likely run January to March, and that is for farmers or farm families to join and talk with other farmers who are going through this succession planning in a cohort, and get some peer-to-peer learning, as well as work with professionals. The other training is a training opportunity for professionals that are interested in assisting farmers on farm succession planning. So those are happening throughout New England virtually. Both of these are happening virtually. And information is already on our website about the professional training. You can find it at landforgood.org/news. So thank you all for joining us, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Talk to you all soon.
Oh, leave. Oh, I remember that now.